In this lesson, we are going to talk about a very important part of creating web applications, which is validating data coming from the client. If we go to application right now and we try to create a to-do, we have an error that says column name cannot be null, and that's because we are trying to create a to-do without actually typing out the name that should be saved into the database. So what we want to do is make sure we check that the name and the description were actually provided from the form before we actually accept that data. To do this in Laravel, first we'll go to our to-do controller and we are going to come right before we actually try to save that data, and we are going to call a function called validate. If you want to know where the validate function is coming from, it's coming from the controller that we extend, this controller right here. So this controller uses a couple of traits, and one of those traits is validate request, and this trait contains the validate function we are using to validate. So the validate function takes in an instance of the request that we are trying to validate, so we can just call the request function here, and then an array of validation rows. So for example, if we want to make sure that the name is actually required, we can have the required role right here. If we also want to make sure the description is required, then we can have the required role right here for the description. And now, if we come back to our application, give this a refresh, and click on create to do, you can see that it doesn't give us an error anymore, but it redirects us back to this page without actually saving any values to the database or even attempting to create a new to-do. This is great. We can have the name required, the description required, but at the moment there is no feedback given to the user. The user does not know why he's redirected back to this page. So we need to have a way of showing the errors that the user has on this form. To do that, we are going to go to the create.blade.php, so resources, views, to-dos, create, and we are going to add a piece of code to display the errors. Now, I'll take this opportunity to show you how to navigate the documentation. If you visit laravel.com, and when you visit the website, you can search for validation and visit the part of the documentation talking about validation. And you can check out this section called displaying the validation errors and read more about this. But basically, you can check if there are any errors, and if there are any errors, you loop through those errors and display them, because Laravel makes this errors variable available to all views. So we're going to come here and we're just going to say if errors any, and this errors key is provided by Laravel in all of our views, so we can use it without worrying about where it's coming from. So if there are any errors, then we're going to create a div.alert.alert danger, and we are going to loop through each of the errors. So for each errors all will give us a list of errors as error, and we're just going to end for each right here. Then what we want to do is we want to have a list item, but first let's just have a list. So we're going to say on other list.list group, and then have a for each in there, and then here we're going to have a list group item, and here I'm just going to print out the error. So if there are any errors, create a div with an alert danger and create an unordered list, and then for each of the errors that we have, create a list item and display the error in it. So if we come right now, visit our application, refresh, there are no errors, so we don't see those list items. But if I click on create to do, you can see we have the name field is required, the description field is required. How awesome is that? Laravel automatically gives us some great validation errors that we can display in our forms. Now, what if we wanted some more validation rules? Here's what we can do. We can come to the to-dos controller, and using a pipe, we can add more validation rules like minimum of 6 characters or another one maximum of 12 characters. Okay, so if we come right now and the name, we provide 3 characters, and if we click on create to do, you can see the name must be at least 6 characters. Now, if we provide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 characters, and maybe more, so that it's more than 12, and we click on create, you can see that it says it may not be greater than 12 characters. How cool is that? So you can have validation in your controllers just before you actually handle the request. And this validates the data coming in to your application and make sure that you save the right data into your database. So that's how you can handle validation in Laravel.